Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto Manga Chapter review. This one's going to be for Chapter 72, which is called Smaller and More Useful. It's an interesting chapter. I don't think it's amazing, I don't think it's bad. Again, the pacing immediately comes up again as being a problem. Not that much really happens in the chapter, but it's dealing with the stuff that we're sort of interested in, kind of. The problem here is that this feels like quite a recap heavy chapter, especially at the start. And then there's still just an overall sense where, like, I really don't feel like they have it particularly well planned out. Now, maybe it will eventually lead to us getting some massive reveals and it all working out, but how long have they been teasing the Amado stuff? And they decide to start off this is the first chapter of a new volume, with Amado giving a phone call to just relay the information that the audience already knows that happens, only to serve the point of now Shikamaru is up to speed, which doesn't necessarily need to be a thing that you directly show us. That can just be implied to have happened off screen. Borderline, like, there's a lot of stuff about, like, why couldn't you have just skipped to them arriving back? But we don't really know what the mission that a lot of the main characters are doing is, so it's sort of unclear ultimately. But let's get into it. So cover page is interesting. It has Momoshiki on it, so that gives you some sense for, like, okay, cool, we're doing something. The more Momoshiki appearances usually means the more important content that we're dealing with. But then we jump into the opening couple of pages here, and it's basically just Naruto and Shikamaru basically interrogating Kawaki about, do you know anything more about why Amado gave you the karma mark? But it's basically just, the situation is, he restored it without my permission. I don't know anything about what other motivation he could possibly have. That's the big mystery. There's that, and then just everything surrounding Amado. Once again teasing that that's what we're sort of building up towards, I guess. So Kawaki's being quite rude to Shikamaru here. Worthless and upset. What a great combo. It's a nice comeback, but it's exceptionally kind of rude here. So it feels like the dynamic has shifted a little bit with Kawaki here. He's, where he is, like, say, right now in the anime, it feels like we're dealing with a slightly, quite a bit of a different character here because of everything that's happened. But anyway, Shinobi comes in and is just like, hey, there's a call for you, Shikamaru, and it's from Amado. And from here, this is where we get just a bunch of pages of recap. It's like 7 pages of the chapter here, just going over of, like, hey, we're in the land of snow. It's going to take 3 to 4 days to get back to Konoha. Code has he's basically out on his own. Ada and also Demon are with us. Here's who Demon is. You've already figured out that there's someone else, but let me explain Demon to you a little bit. Ada is, going to, accept your proposition to come to Konoha, basically. Don't offend her, prepare a room for her, and that's, like, most of the kind of details here. They just kind of cover the idea that, Code, yes, his limiters have been removed, but because he doesn't have Ada anymore, that is also a blow against his battle strength as well. That you've basically traded the idea of Code is weaker, but he has these incredibly powerful allies, for Code is now stronger, but doesn't have these allies. And Amado's position is that I think we're in a better position because of this. So he basically just wants that, like, yeah, Ada and Demon allied with Konoha is huge, so there's no real issue here. He does, talk about how, these are just the game pieces moving on the board. He hangs up the call after this point. Ada's like, who are you calling game pieces? It's just a figure of speech. And she does kind of get across that, like, ultimately, again, she's the one in control of this situation. She seems to be following Amado, but she makes it kind of clear here that if things don't go the way I want them to, I'm going to kill you out of spite. She's highlighting that, like, Kawaki better like me, basically, in the end. And this is where we do bring up, this is one slightly interesting part of this, but again, they don't go into it too much. Why do you look so shocked? It should be obvious. I'm almost irritated enough to kill you right now for giving me this ability to enchant the entire human race. And Demon points out that actually I'll be the one killing people if you want it done. And this is again this mystery of Amado. There's one thing about like him and the carbon mark and what's going on there, but this is the other side of things, is that how on earth does he give someone that ability? Like, Ada's powers are effectively one of the craziest ones in the entire series, and then Demon's powers, and he is effectively the most powerful character in the series at this point, also come from Amado. How on earth did he do that? That's, in my mind, a bigger mystery than the whole whatever he's planning to do with the karma. That's maybe more plot related, but to me the bigger insight is sort of like, really, is he just a really good scientist and is able to develop these abilities in a scientific way? That's what I want to know. There's way more going on with Amado than we think, but they're just so unwilling to just like pull the trigger and just, you know, deliver what that is. It feels like we're going to get there, but once again, you open up the volume and say, actually, it'll be 3-4 days before we arrive there, when I think most people were sort of expecting that where you ended the last chapter off, you basically have the option to now do a sort of cut to them arriving at the village. You don't need to make a big deal about them, you know, making their way back. So this is where Shikamaru calls, he basically is like, summon Naruto to the Hokage office, Team 7 as well, including Kawaki. So he wants to speak to everyone here, a lot of the key players. But interestingly, that means that Sarada and Mitsuki are also going to be coming to this as well. Then we cut over to Borto's perspective. So it seems like he's just woken up here. He puts on the new headband he has, of course, the one that Sasuke is allowing him to keep. And then we get a really just like weird sequence of panels where I have no clue what way to interpret this. Let me just describe this. So he tightens his headband, and then he just has his like hands behind his back, like, I don't know, like is he just pulling his trousers on or something like that? Then he looks down, and it's a really small panel where you just see him looking down, and then they focus on like his mouth also looking down, and then it's just a more full body shot and he's like also looking down, and it's just ... I'm like, what am I meant to take from this? Like, Momoshiki's going to show up in a couple of chapters, but there's no real indication of what exactly this means. Like, I have no clue what's going on here. Like, whatever the artist was trying to convey with these couple of panels, I do not know. But anyway, Borto walks down the stairs and Hinata comes to speak to him. And here's where we get the more emotional sort of mother-son kind of scene of like, Hinata hasn't really been in the series to react to all the crazy stuff that's happened to Borto all that much. So he's kind of been like, hey, I've been called for a mission. It's true. Direct summons from Shikamaru. We've been on hiatus, but finally we're ready to go. And Hinata's kind of sad and is kind of like, okay, that's great. And when he looks at her, it's like, Mom, we see that Hinata is crying. And she's kind of like, I know I need to send you off with a smile, but whenever you head out somewhere, I just can't help thinking that this time you're not going to come back. So, you know, I appreciate them doing this. Like, we also see that Himawari comes out at this point, so she gets to see this quite emotional scene kind of play out. Borto does apologize. I'm sorry for keeping you, making you worry. He doesn't know the mission details yet, but it seems to be something only his team can carry out. I don't really have a choice, do I? And he says, it'll be all right. I mean, I even died that once, but I came back totally fine. I'll come home no matter what. I promise. Let's be careful. So this is an interesting one to have this scene in a way happen after Borto has already sort of like in a way died and been resurrected. And it's now highlighting that, will he come back or won't he come back? It's an interesting thing to do, that sort of like writing tactic of like, will he, won't he, when we obviously have a flash forward scene highlighting that he does come back. But we'll discuss the stuff with Momoshiki in a second. I like that Hinata is here. I continue to absolutely hate her manga design and the way the artist draws her in this. And in that sense, I'm just kind of like, okay, hopefully the anime will improve that, because Hinata's one of my favorite characters, and so every time I see her here with this really just boring design, it's just not great to see. But anyway, it's just he promises he will come home, and the idea is that it seems like we are setting up what seems to be the finale of this, pre-time skip section of the story. So I think that's more of what they're teasing, the idea of this is sort of this final battle type situation where things are going to happen. Now, it is weird to do this when we have already had a situation where effectively like Naruto like didn't come back, and we had that whole situation, and then Borto didn't come back. So doing it right now after all that feels a bit weird, but fine. So Borto walks outside the house, and suddenly Momoshiki appears. Now, the idea here is that this is very much like in his head here. That's what's going on here. But anyway, Momoshiki reacts to what he just said. You promised to come home. How irresponsible. Borto points out, you can't resurrect anymore. Why are you still sticking around? And he just says, let me ask you, boy, why do you still cling to your meaningless existence when you know your future holds nothing but despair? And Borto's like, what? And Momoshiki says, I told you that you were going to lose everything, and that moment is rapidly approaching. You shall despair, lose your will to live, enough to want to escape this world. And when that day comes, I shall take over and live Uzumaki Borto's life for you. So that's his current plan in all of this. He can't resurrect, but he can possess Borto's body if Borto himself effectively loses the will to sort of go on. If Borto doesn't remain strong, then Momoshiki can just like assume control over Borto's body. It's not a full-on resurrection in that sense, and that there's always going to be the option, I suppose, for Borto to sort of like, take over once again. But if something breaks Borto, then it would be Momoshiki in control of Borto's body for who knows how long. And so Momoshiki's clinging on to that idea of like, oh, I'll be able to live on that way, even if I have to just like be you directly, and not just the idea of you'll be my vessel, which I'll shape to my own will type situation that most of the Ototsukis want to do. He says, don't worry, all you'll need to do is just cower away quietly in a corner of your psyche for eternity. I do not care about resurrecting anymore, since possessing your body shall yield the same result. It'll happen soon enough, no matter what form it takes. You were always meant to be my vessel. Borto doesn't agree with this. I'd rather die than hand myself over to you. And Momoshiki just says, I won't let you die ever again. You are my precious vessel, my life. No one can have you. And he just says, Borto says, I'll make sure you never emerge again. You'll be the one to despair in the future. And he leaves and says, splutter all you want. Your fate is already decided. I look forward to it, Uzumaki Borto. So as Mitsuki and Sarada arrive, Borto is still sort of shouting in response to this. I'll decide my own fate. Thank you very much. And this is I think everything with Sarada and Mitsuki in this chapter. They're just really, really like shocked to see Borto so like intense and pumped up. They don't really know what's just happened there. And Mitsuki just notes that even if he dies and comes back or becomes Otsutsuki, Borto will likely always be Borto. And so he's ran off ahead of them, but without even talking to them. So that's fine, I guess. It's a weird angle to have on it. It's the one that makes sense, obviously. The main takeaway I would have from this is that it feels like we are now in the arc where at the end of it, that moment that will apparently lead to Borto's despair, where those eyes will take everything from you, that moment is going to happen, I'm going to guess, at some point within probably the next... The pacing is so difficult here. I'm going to guess the next 7 chapters. So basically this volume and then the next one will be the last ones before that. Now, they might stretch it on and it will be another volume, but I can't see it going on any longer than that. So I think it's either going to be in the next 3, the next 7, or the next 11 chapters that this all actually happens. Because we need to get to that point. I think most people with Borto now are at the point where it's just like, hopefully the time skip will just bring the series to a new level. That's what it really needs. We do go back for a page to Hinata and Himawari. So, interestingly, Himawari says, Mom, I was just thinking that if I became a ninja, maybe I could help Borto out a little. Or would you worry even more? And Hinata's just like, Himawari? That's interesting. Obviously, if you've been watching the anime, you know that currently, where we're like immediately right now in the anime, Himawari is in the academy. And is sort of like half wanting to be a ninja. That's sort of the way I'd interpret it, is that she's doing the academy because she's having fun with her friends, and she's not like against, I think, the idea of being a ninja, but she doesn't seem fully committed to it. She's not saying that like her goal at the academy is to become the best ninja ever, whereas I'm assuming that when they get to this section in the anime, they'll connect what they're doing currently with Himawari and her academy arc, with this probably being the moment where she decides that, no, I have to become a ninja because I can't watch like Borto and everyone else go out the door and I'm just here helpless. I need to become a ninja so I can be useful on these missions as well, or I can be a factor in that sort of stuff. And especially knowing that going forward, obviously the conflict is basically between her two brothers, effectively, Borto and Kawaki. It makes sense, I think, that you would have her go down this road. It's a decent sign in terms of like post time skip, her becoming a bigger player in the story, and I think that's what I hope this means, and that it's not just there to be Hinata and Himawari show concern for Borto, and that's all you're meant to take from it. I hope it actually leads to something. So, Team 7 is on their way to the meeting. And Borto just looks at the karma mark in his hand and says, I won't let you do as you please, Momoshiki. So then we cut to what is like the end sequence of the chapter. And that is Code arrives at the kind of, the dimension, basically, the place where the whole Otsutsuki symbols are, where the 10 Tails is being kept. So it's revealed here he can use his claw marks to get here because he put them there like a while ago when Jigen brought him there. Otherwise, Code actually doesn't have space-time ninjutsu. He can't just suddenly appear there unless he keeps that claw mark there. So that's what's going on here. Then we go over to the 10 Tails, of course. And he just notes that Borto and Kawaki are full Otsutsuki now. They might master space-time ninjutsu before long. This place will no longer be secure. So, Bug and Code have this talk about how effectively, like, oh, how do you feel now that you're more powerful, but you're not as powerful as Demon? And Code just notes that, like, yeah, I was outclassed. It should be a terrible situation, but I'm not obsessing over it. I'm more messed up over my broken heart. So the whole... his feelings for Ada, they're trying to make that into a plot point. And I think this is probably where the character, I think, isn't working so well. Is that I think there's some decent stuff going on here. But it definitely feels like it's just this character who I'm not super connected to, continuing on the plot of the villain who was actually really good, Jigen. Like, I think Code, they can do stuff with Code to make him interesting, but I'm very much thinking past Code at this point, just because it feels like I'm not sure if he's going to be the be-all, end-all of the series. He's a fine villain, but I'm not really connecting strongly with him. So, then he decides, okay, so what's he going to do here to show that he has a bit of an advantage? He's going to adjust 10 Tails into a more manageable size. So what he does here, he shows sort of the scope of his powers, which is that he starts putting claw marks all over the ten tails. And when I say all over, I mean all over. This thing is covered in these kind of claw mark strips. He does mention here a little bit more technical detail. The claw marks are made by mixing just a little bit of iron from my blood with physically embodied chakra. They're half material, half chakra. He used to be limited, but now he can put out enough to fully enwrap the ten tails. But what's he doing this for? So this is where we see the claw marks have always had those little dots on them, but now what seems to be happening is that as he's sort of compressing and shrinking the ten tails down, those dots begin to grow into spikes and then fall off, and those spikes become these Zetsu-like beings that are sort of half claw mark, half ten tails monster, effectively. And we see this happening all over it. So effectively, this is Code making his army. It's not explained super well. He just says, like, a Biju is by nature a giant lump of chakra, so I'm simply splitting it up, like pinching pieces off of molding clay. So it's hard to sort of, I suppose, imagine this, because, like, the idea is that these strips have been primarily just used as portals. So, like, I think you just, for the sake of what's happening here, kind of almost have to ignore the whole portal aspect of this and more utilize the fact that he just explained to us what the strips are made up of, which is that there's a physical aspect to them, which is like the iron in his blood, but then it is physical chakra. And it seems like what's happening here is that the physical chakra is being sort of enhanced as, like, the chakra gets sort of squeezed out through them, and that's what's creating these monsters. So it is revealed that these beings, monsters, whatever you want to call them, do have the same power as Code. They seem to be able to use the claw marks. They have claw marks on themselves, and they seem to be able to use Code's ones, but it's not clear immediately if they can make them themselves. So if they can do that, then they seem incredibly powerful. If they have to rely on only Code's ones, they're still powerful, because obviously it means he can have his whole army just appear out of any claw mark that Code makes, and that's actually a decent threat. And that's where we end the chapter, with the idea that they're much more smaller and more useful now. So what's going on here? This is obviously a way for Code to make up for the fact that he is on his own effectively now. He does not have a fighting force. And it seems like what he wants to do now is focus on his revenge. That the plan, I suppose, can come later, once he takes his revenge with regards to feeding someone to the ten tails. He'll, I suppose, accomplish that by also taking his revenge. But it seems like he has this army here to assist him with going after all the people that he wants to take out, which obviously is basically the entire main cast who helped to kill Jigen. So in that sense, okay, cool. We actually have characters in these kind of monsters that can actually be taken out. So it means that we're going to get some big action coming up where these things, I guess, will get taken out by our characters getting to sort of show off how powerful they are. That's the way I sort of view this, and that we can actually have fights where, like, our characters are shown to be powerful by taking out all these random no-name monsters. My expectation is that they'll be reasonably skilled, but, like, they won't be so powerful that, like, Naruto, Sasuke, and the like can't actually take them out. But this is just for him to have numbers to basically, I suppose, suppress medium to low level shinobi, so that the numbers aren't, like, insane against him, and just control and dominate wherever he wants to go. It's still not the greatest idea about what exactly Code's, like, planning to do. We obviously have the whole idea of once he gets the 10 tails fed and it turns into the chakra tree, it will get the fruit, and the fruit is what he wants to become an Otsutsuki, but the revenge seems to be more of the focus here. Other than that, I think my problem with the plotting of this chapter is just that they're making a big deal about, like, Borto going out on this mission, but it's very unclear what the mission actually is. I'm assuming what it either has to be is just they're attending a meeting at Shikamaru's office where he will catch everyone up to speed on what's going on, or he's going to send them out to sort of in a way like intercept Amado, Ada, and Demon on their way back here. That's the only thing that makes sense with regards to them actually being sort of sent out of the village on a dangerous mission, is that they actually have to go somewhere. And I guess it would make sense to send your powerful characters away to like accomplish that. Is it going to leave the village sort of in a way like on its own, like without anyone to protect it, and suddenly all our characters are like on the outskirts of the Leaf Village trying to make their way back in? There's a sense for like, okay, how is this actually going to play out? Where will the battle happen? Those sort of questions. I'm not really sure where to go with that. Because ultimately what I want to happen is I want to get Amado, Ada, and Demon back to the Leaf Village as soon as possible, because I just want to know what the deal is with Amado. What's he building towards? Why does he care so much about Kawaki's karma mark? And also just, like, who are you? How are you able to basically create, like, all of the most powerful characters in the series? That seems, like, insane. We always talk about how certain things are overpowered in Naruto, but it seems like Amado's tech level and what he is capable of doing with these cyborg characters is insane. Basically, it's that's the most overpowered thing in my mind in the series, to a degree. That, okay, it's one thing what Demon's powers actually are, but the idea is that Amado is skilled enough to give someone those type of powers, or a power that basically forces people to be like attracted and care about Ada. That's crazy. But that's like basically he has mind control. He has the ability to give people mind control powers, and what's going on with that. So those are the things that I'm kind of keeping my eye out on. So it's an interesting chapter. I don't think it was a complete failure, but I also wouldn't be praising this one too much, because we came back after a month off. It was 2 months waiting for this chapter, and it doesn't really feel like an extra month planning for this chapter was maybe used that well here. This series doesn't really need much recap, because so little happens in each chapter, and that's effectively what we got for at least like 5 chapters of the phone call. It's just they are dragging it out. They are definitely dragging it out, and I for sure want something of note to happen within the next 3 chapters, whatever this volume is. Whether that will be us getting to the end game or there's another volume, I don't really know. But the interesting stuff about who's being sent on the mission is that Sarada and Mitsuki are there, and I'm not really sure like why, other than just, okay, we're not going to do the thing we've been doing in the manga for a while, which is basically none of the characters matter unless they are Naruto, Sasuke, Borto, Kawaki, and like Amado, effectively, and Shikamaru, I guess. Like, if you're not one of those characters, you're basically not in the story. At least it feels like they're bringing the others back in. For what like purpose, I'm not really sure, in that we're going to have to eventually build up what's going on with Sarada and her powers, and what way we're going to do like Mangekyo Sharingan with her. Mitsuki, it feels like there probably has to be some notable thing with him and his story and his connection to the other characters that happens that is like a big moment for him, but it feels like we're nowhere near getting that. So I don't really know. So what would I give this chapter? Like 7? Like, I feel like 6.5 maybe is where I would go. Like 6.5, 7-ish, depending on like if you want to lean into more positivity or more negativity. It's just one of those ones. I'd probably say 6.5, in that it's still good, but it doesn't to me do enough to kind of justify a really, really high score. But that's basically, I think, everything I want to say. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on Boruto chapter 72. Where do you think the story is going to go from here? How did you like this chapter? But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.